This is a moment to be flexible. This is a moment to be adaptable. This is a moment where, dare I say it, you're having fun. You're actually putting stuff out there in new ways. Yo, Chris, man, what are you doing? What are you up to?
I'm just helping people reinvent their lives. No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. Well, I'm going to join it. Cool.
God bless, we're breaking these runs. Life too short to play on speed run.
So, Todd, I'd like to know what we're talking about today, man. Are we going to be starting something? What are we doing?
Yeah, we're doing a little thing that we call taking action, which, I mean, let's be honest, when you're in a process of reinventing yourself, reinventing your career, there's a lot of things that we talk about on this podcast that can help, but I don't think there's anything more important than getting in the mindset of taking action, or maybe more specifically, taking new action. Because a lot of the people that we work with, and I know a lot of your clients, Chris, scouring LinkedIn for the same jobs or recreating the same career has diminishing returns to it. And so what we're going to be talking about today is this notion of taking action and also helping people self-identify where you're at within this concept of reinvention, so you can understand what actions you need to take, because depending on where you're at, the actions are slightly different. So the goal here, and we're going to give some takeaways from this session, is to give you a couple of things to do so you can kind of be in action, because staying frozen, staying scared, staying behind the sidelines of, oh, well, this doesn't really affect me yet, is not really a good game plan.
But Todd, wait a second. I have a question coming up.
All right.
What if I don't want to take action and I do just want to stay behind the sidelines, and then everything magically works out without me taking action?
I mean, this is where the tough love comes in. I mean, let's be honest. I've dealt with a lot of people who have that attitude and unfortunately had to come to the realization that change is necessary, especially in the state of the world. And look, we're not here to force people to take new action or to make change. We're here to help people who have gotten to that point to some degree. Reinvention is something that is absolutely necessary. And it doesn't have to be like this, oh, terrible thing. It can actually be fun. I mean, look, our whole premise, our whole concept is this idea that your next career can be one that is aligned with a future for yourself that matches your lifestyle, your money making, even your purpose, as opposed to the game that you played before. Like, reinvention is an opportunity to create deep alignment. When people say that to me, I'm like, that's fine. But I really want to be talking to the people that can find that level of potential excitement about what's possible, because that very thing can drive you to take these actions. That's how I look at it.
That's how we got into this mess, right? If you're in a moment where you're like, yes, I want the outcome of the action, but to take the action sounds, that sounds really painful. I don't really want to go there. I don't want to do that. Sorry. There's no step 1, step 2, question mark, step 3 profit. Like, we're talking about step 2 here, where you're actually in the muck and you're doing the thing, and it's messy and it's a little scary. It's different. It's painful. It's experimental. It's trial and error, right? It's all of that stuff. And that's really the magic of reinvention, is in that messy middle.
I can tell you, as a coach for this long, helping people do this, 20 years of doing this, I've seen this with so many of my clients, that going through a process like this and getting clarity and creating a game plan and working on your mindset and taking action, like the tenets that we talk about here all the time to reinvent yourself, has a bright future. There is something that can be absolutely extraordinary, like a new life, a new work where you make money, where you're doing work that's aligned with what you're really here to do. Like, it's absolutely possible. And this call, like the taking action part, might be the most important thing, because if you're not taking action, it's just not going to happen for you. You need to be doing things. And what I love about this, Chris, is that we talk about taking action, and I said it before, depending on where you're at right now. And I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of uncertainty in the air. And for some of the reinventors that we work with, they're not sure, right? Like, they're not actually sure what that future is or it could be. And therefore, the act or the taking action part needs to be about getting clarity, taking some time to do that work, to first get a vision or a series of possibilities about what your next steps could be, that have some level of excitement behind it, that have some level of hope, because we're living in a world that's not telling you that all the time, but we're here to tell you that it is possible, and to remind you that you can break free from these old trajectories. But we got to start there, right? We got to start with getting clarity and creating some form of vision or a series of visions that wake you up in the morning, that have you getting some fuel in your step, right?
Yeah, that can be the first action in a sense for a reinventor. I just had this conversation a couple hours ago with the prospective client, right? Where before we met, had exchanged a message around like feeling stuck. I don't know what to do. I don't even know what I want. And I just had asked, listen, before we meet, just think on what you might want to do without any constraints. Just kind of gave a prompt around that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we had our face-to-face conversation this morning, when we got to the part where he's talking about what he might want to do with no constraints, first time the guy smiled in the whole conversation, saw his whole face light up as he talked about this thing, which, by the way, was a really practical possibility. That's something that could be a business for sure. I'm not saying that's what he's going to end up doing, but it was not some pie in the sky imaginary thing. Just taking the action of literally thinking about that and writing down, I think he said he had like 10 or 12 options that he thought of, it opened up like a portal in him to this world of possibility that could exist. Just went from being like, I'm stuck inexorably, there's no place I can go, to, oh, maybe there's something. And honestly, like right there, just maybe there's something, that spark is, well, that was life-changing for me when I experienced it, right? I think, Todd, our clients, this is kind of like an underrated life-changing moment. The first moment that you think, hey, it could be different.
It's like you lift up the record needle for a second that you've been on, the rat race thing, you're running on this treadmill, and then we're here to say, wait a minute, just for a moment, take some time to get clarity. Just for a moment, do what Chris just said. Take the prompt of what could I do? What interests me? Just free yourself. You don't have to do anything with it yet. That's why the first tenet in reinvention that we keep talking about is getting clarity, because we know that when you take the time to think about what would make you happy, and this is for people who have that, I'm stuck, I'm not really sure, I'm not happy, I'm burned out, I was just thrown the door, I don't have any new ideas. Like, I get it. This is a journey to reinvent yourself. It's not an automatic thing that just happens, okay? And the clarity piece, you gotta start there, because creating that, what we call that North Star, does something to the subconscious mind. It gives you something to orient. When you said that he smiled for the first time, like, this counts. That's what's going to drive action, being happy, being excited, and I just don't know why people aren't fully getting that. You got to create a vision that wakes you up in the morning. It doesn't mean that you become this pie in the sky, woo-woo person that's just walking around in dreamland.
Yeah.
No, we work on that stuff later. Okay. We can build tracks towards making some of these things come true, if not all of it. But you got to start there as a strategy, like as a real life strategy. And then we start doing some of these other things that are necessary. So I love that you
honestly, just a great experience for me, even to witness that every time I get to witness it, right? And it's just, like you said, we didn't end our conversation by saying, okay, quit your job, go do your dream. That's not the way it works. I think it's important. Getting clarity is an act. It is a process. It is an act. It is an objective thing. And yeah, this is in the coachy part of things where we're like, find your North Star, think about your big picture. Like, it feels very esoteric and theoretical, but it isn't. It is an act of commitment to the possibility of joy. It's important. It's really freaking important to get most of us out of bed in the morning.
I love this conversation, man, because there's a lot of reasons to be fearful in the world. There's a lot of reasons to be dismissive of doing something like this. And I'm just here, 20 years as a coach, saying this is so important to look at getting clarity like a strategy. You just said it, codify it. It is something. And then we have other people in the reinvention spectrum, if you will, who are at a different stage, right? Meaning that maybe things have already been started, or there's some side hustles happening right now, right? And there's a little bit more action, because there is an evolution in reinvention, meaning that everyone starts out the same. Like, oh my God, I don't want to reinvent. Like, oh, let me look for another job. Let me do this. Okay, you take the coachy advice here. You start getting some clarity. You start seeing that it's probably more necessary than you would like to believe, that you need to start thinking about this more creatively. And then things do start happening. And at that stage in the process, people now have new opportunities in front of them that may feel different than they were before. And then taking action often requires something a little bit different. It's not necessarily about getting clarity. It's about experimenting with new things in the world, experimenting with a new identity of yours that you're now wearing. And there's a saying in Silicon Valley. I've worked with a lot of tech people, right? And so a lot of startup folks. And there's a saying, fail fast, in Silicon Valley. That's a mantra embedded in a lot of startups. And there's something around reinvention that applies to, applying that fail fast attitude to us as we are now exploring new options. And when you get to that second stage of reinvention, you start looking at potential new careers or even entrepreneurial ventures. And we'll talk a lot about that on this podcast, but you want to have that attitude of trying things, taking action, failing fast, learning, getting back up on it and trying new things until you start to find that flow.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remind people, like, the stakes are actually really low in this moment, right? In the moment when you're turning the corner to saying, hey, I'm committing to reinvention, I'm figuring it out and I'm in it, I'm taking some action. I wish I had the stat. We'll have to pull the stat. Hey, Jamie, could you pull that up?
Where'd you come up with the name Jamie, by the way?
That's Joe Rogan's.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah. He's always like, Jamie, could you Google, is the sun round? Is the sun round, Jamie? Could you Google that? I totally lost my train of thought from that. That made me laugh.
Yeah, that was good. You were saying there are some stats around taking action.
Okay, this is it. People who are entrepreneurs specifically, let's use them as a model. Most entrepreneurs are serial entrepreneurs, which means they start multiple ventures, which means that they experiment, and which means that they fail. Todd, when you say fail fast, that's a scary phrase. To me, in my corporate mindset back in the day, it's like, fail? I can't fail. I must be a success machine. Like, that is just what I do over and over and over again. We're not talking about like catastrophic failure here. What we're talking about is fairly low stakes experimentation, trying a new thing, exploring whether the theory that you have in your mind as to what might be a business, let's say, is actually supported by some people in the market, and putting it out there and maybe doing a little free services for somebody and seeing if it's actually what they want and things like that. Anyone who started a business and anyone who's successful in starting a business, they had 25 failures before they actually hit success or whatever it is. That's
absolutely right. And actually, it goes to the point that we've talked about before on here, which is the idea of starting to earn money in new and different ways, even if it's very small in the very beginning. It counts. We've talked a lot about the fact that we met on TikTok, two middle-aged guys. We started this podcast in our community. I have like $20 sitting in my TikTok account. It's nothing, but it counts to the extent of that's a possibility for me now. Like, money has actually come in. I have personally several different sources of income that come to me from things that I've done in the past, from new things. This is the mindset of reinvention, is looking out into the field of possibilities when you have an idea about what is possible and you get that clarity, and then you start to play. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is this notion of taking action, failing fast, and then being detached from the results. And that's hard for a lot of people that are starting out in reinvention, because especially for people that have worked their way up the corporate ladder for a long time, like, they're not used to that. You weren't used to that idea. Like, there is no failure where things can take a long time. This is a moment to be flexible. This is a moment to be adaptable. This is a moment where, dare I say it, you're having fun. You're actually putting stuff out there in new ways. And, people have a problem with that because there's fear of being judged. There's fear of not looking good. There's fears of like, who am I to do that thing? But this is the time. If you get anything from us, this is the time to put all that aside and start taking action and embody this notion of being detached from the results, okay? And it's easier said than done, but it's a very important part of what we keep talking about here about mindset and keeping your mindset positive and optimistic. But it's such an important part, that detachment piece.
And I also think it's a beautiful time in the world to be a reinventor and to be trying something new. Many of us, social media is part of our plan, right? To put ourselves out there and to put out what we're doing. And if you look at what's happening on social media, there is a trend towards authenticity, towards rawness, towards watching people build it live, right? Watching people start from smaller or start from scratch and show you the journey of how they're building themselves. So I feel like the ancient stigma that we've all inherited of having to look polished and having to I come from a mindset of, it's maybe an inherited 2 generations depression type of mindset from my family of like, you close the curtains, you build in private, and then you only reveal it when it is perfect and shiny and ready. And that paradigm is dead. It's over.
Over.
2025 and 2026, that is over.
Yep.
Look at some of the creators out there, even some of the established big business people out there. Like look at Gary Vaynerchuk or something like that. You're getting the whole package. You're getting the whole thing. You're getting all the context. It's sharing as you go, as you build. Not to say that there's not a place for polish, right? When you're at a phase in your business, and if that's what your business requires or your work requires, it's not saying that that doesn't have its value, but it's saying you don't have to feel trapped by this idea of I can only reveal my symphony when it is finally polished and perfect.
So well said, man. I can't echo that point enough. And I've seen too many people really set themselves up in the reinvention process for disappointment when they are literally building like that mad scientist behind the scenes and then revealing to the world and then disappointed because the results didn't happen. That's not what we're talking about here. And it doesn't mean, by the way, that you have to start a social media account and start like doing everything. I'll give you a good example when you're sharing. I remember a client of mine came to me about a year ago, and this was somebody that was pretty high up in the corporate world and either was really burned out or being shown the door. I forget which one, but it was on, right? And hired me as a coach. And I got to him like, what do you want to be doing? And actually, this person wanted to be more of a public speaker and like a workshop leader. And we started doing some work around like the content, like, well, what do you want to teach? And it turned out he had a bunch of really great ideas for workshops that he could offer to his current employer that was just a need, but it wasn't really like it within the realm of his current job. And eventually he got let go or left, I forget again which one, and then went back from our conversations and offered this workshop to his company, and they paid him $5,000. I'll never forget, to deliver a workshop to his now former employer. So he came in as a speaker, as a workshop leader, right? He said it was the best day of his life. I'll never forget letting me know he got paid to do this. And then it was about, like, it wasn't just roses from there, because then he needed to continue reinvention and learn all these new skills. Well, how am I going to take that one thing that I did and maybe create it into a business? And he had to learn new skills, right? Which is another big thing that we talk about here. Once you start reinventing, he had to learn a little bit about sales and marketing, which wasn't his forte. It's like, all right, how do I get this out to other companies? Or how do I now upsell this into my current company? Whatever it was. I forgot the path he went down. But that's a really good example where he could have then pulled up into, oh, okay, like I got this one thing. And my recommendation was, no, this is the time to be in action. And it doesn't mean that your delivery isn't going to be polished. It was very polished what he did, but he was still taking a lot of action. And lo and behold, this became his whole career. I mean, the guy's been like doing a bunch of things in this world that sent him down pathways that he couldn't have expected. But I think it goes to what you're saying, right? Which is just go for it. And the answers are there if you're taking action.
Yeah. There's also that sense of detachment that you alluded to before, where it's my first action outside of corporate. The first contract that I landed when I decided to do something out of corporate was not really what I wanted to do. At that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just grabbed something. I said, oh, this might be good. I made a lot of money from that. I made more money from that than from the things that actually I was drawn to.
Was it consulting or fractional work?
That was consulting. It could have gone down the road of fractional leadership, but I didn't let it go down the road of fractional leadership. I did a consulting gig, and then it was going to turn into me potentially leading. And that part I said, no, I don't want to do that because I want to go a different path. But I think the idea of attachment, detachment, it was hard for me in that moment to look at the check coming in from that gig and say, I really should replicate. I should do 3 of those gigs a year and then I'm golden. But that wasn't what I wanted, because I had been experimenting in other ways. And honestly, I'd made a couple of bucks here. It was like, we're literally talking about tens of thousands of dollars and like $500. Right. And I said, the $500 path is the one that I want to go down and scale and expand because my heart is there.
Yeah.
Now, I know not everybody has necessarily the privilege of that choice. And a lot of times when we talk to people, we say, that's why the multiple streams of income thing is so great. Because it's like, hey, if you can keep doing this and maybe get one of those gigs a year while you explore as yet less lucrative, but more heart-aligned path, right? There's so many different flavors and areas along the spectrum of what you can do, but it all starts with taking action. And like you like to talk about, Todd, just a new way to make money, even if it's 10 cents here or $1,000 there or whatever it is. That's a channel that once you open it up, you're like, Oh, that's a channel I can earn in essentially forever. I can replicate what I did there and lean into that.
Yeah.
And it's so freeing to have 6 of those instead of the one that you had for 20 years or
It's so
whatever.
juicy, man. Yeah, you're such a reinventor. Man. Obviously, we're doing this together, but there's so many things within that. First off, we're going to do an episode around the financial planning part of reinvention that I really want to pick your brain on because you've done such a good job of being smart around your finances. It's like the on the ground thing that we don't always talk about in every episode, but how to plan.
It's not the most exciting coachy thing in the world.
But it's so important. You built proper runway to explore because some people would be in that position and getting paid tens of thousands of dollars for a contract that is still reinvented, but doesn't juice you. And then have this other thing that's like $500, but does juice you. And you had the ability to go towards that thing, I'm guessing, because you had proper financial runway in mind with you and your family and your kids and everything to actually go do that. So it wasn't just a privilege that you were given, you were smart about it. And I think we do want to go into that in an upcoming episode. So I don't want to just poo-poo it. I think it's really valuable.
Yeah, no, I do think it's valuable. And I think a real takeaway before we even get into that part of the conversation is just for people to realize that they can take their flavor of this. And this is what we do in Reinvention in the coaching community all the time, Todd, is that we're filtering bigger picture ideas to meet the circumstances of the people that we're talking to. And there's so many different flavors of this. I mean, we were talking to a guy in the community the other day, great conversation, where it's like the way he looks at his life, he says, I really want a reliable, stable corporate chunk, whether that's fractional or whether that's a full job or whatever it is. And we're helping him understand that keep opening up this new path of entrepreneurialism on the side. You don't have to put all your eggs in that basket. You can keep looking for this and you can keep exploring that and keep this alive because something's happening here. There's a spark here. It's lighting you up. What we, I think, would both hate to see is as he's building this sort of newer venture that a big W-2 walks in the door and he goes, I'll just take that. And he drops that completely.
Right. And that could happen. I mean, this is the world. And it's like, he'll make that decision, but we want him to make that decision from a very evolved, sober place where he can really see all the opportunities that are in front of him. And I think on that particular call, his eyes open to the idea that, wow, there are things that he could be doing and ways that he could be looking at this new business that is emerging that are different than he was doing at that time on that call, right? And a lot of this, we're going to do a whole episode on building new skills, but when you're reinventing also your identity and who you are when you're working. And that hit home for him where he's like, oh, I need to look at this more like I'm the CEO of this company and I need to understand sales and marketing, where for him, he's an operations person, right? And you could see his eyes open up and he got excited around the opportunity to potentially be a new version of himself that has autonomy and learning and curiosity at his core. Now we'll see what happens. He may get another gig that's a W-2 and he may choose to go back to that. That's totally fine. What we said to him was that going down this pathway of reinvention and really exploring it and allowing yourself to grow and explore who you are and learning new skills is going to be worthy no matter what happens.
It's going to make you even a better asset in a trad job anyway, right? Yep. I mean, just to have put on that CEO hat and made those difficult conversations and partnerships and strategic conversations and thinking, that is only going to enhance, even if you go back and you say, here, I'm going to do this and I'm never even going to look at this venture again, that's just going to help you grow. Yeah, again, the downside is so minimal here. I think that's one of those things I caught myself for years being obsessed with the downside of like, what if I make a mistake? What if somebody sees me trying something and it doesn't work out? We could probably do a whole podcast episode about the mindset of being obsessed with seeming like you're getting it right all the time and how much that holds you back and anchors you. The fear of any perception of failure. Frankly, it's just no way to live, actually.
This is the deeper stuff, right? Dealing with your own personal identity and then having to change that and the fear of letting go of the past and creating what's new. That's why one of the things that I just love in the reinvention process, and I really say this to everybody in our community and clients that I work with, is that when you're starting to look out into the future, right, you get that clarity and you're starting to look at the future with bright eyes, like opportunistic eyes. And you start to meet the doubt and fear, which is going to come up, right? It does come up for all of us, right? Any great leader or person that's been successful will tell you that. A very practical way to combat that is to realize that no matter what it is that you may want to do, even at the most idealistic state, there are already 1 million people or more, most likely, who have already done that thing or are doing that thing successfully that are probably worse than you. I mean, I tell people this all the time. And we told this gentleman this on the call. It's such a powerful lens to realize that you have the ability and the capacity to reinvent your career in so many different ways because others are already doing it and have done it. Yes, you may need to work harder. Yes, you may need to work smarter. Yes, you may need to build new skills. Yes, you may need to change your mindset and work on that. You may need to do all the things that we're talking about here, but it's possible. Okay, it's possible. And when I look out at my own career and I look out for the people that I'm modeling from and learning from, and I see what they're doing, they'll say the same thing. They tell me, I failed 1 million times to get here, right? So that gives me the realistic motivation to be like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to fail a bunch along the way. I'm going to fail fast, but I'm going to be detached and I'm going to keep going because I know that there's a possibility for me to hit the vision of what I see for my life. And that's reinvention, being connected with that and then going through the process, right? And then getting people like us to support you or others to have accountability, which is another whole thing we'll talk about here. But that's the key thing, I think, in this whole thing.
That's a super important concept, right? Around the fact that the vast majority of people doing the thing that you want to do or that looks like what you want to do are not special in terms of they do not have a special talent. They don't have some sort of magic. They don't have something that goes beyond what you could possibly ever have. Mostly what happens is they did it. They took action, they tried, they failed, they made mistakes, they learned, they kept going. They did it over and over again. I mean, insert online successful person, guru / celebrity here, and we'll have Jamie look up all their failures, you know? I mean, really, truly, like look at anyone that you want to put up top of this list, right? They have made mistakes. They have done the wrong thing. They've taken wrong turns. They've failed. And I think it's really important, like we talk about, Todd, letting your talent be the limit of what you can do, right? That's something we love to embrace, this idea of push yourself to the limit of your talent, not your effort or discipline or focus or confidence in belief in yourself to be able to do it. And if you look at the people, honestly, whatever is your thing that you are reinventing yourself into, whatever that is, honestly look out there. I bet you could go find a successful person who's making millions, who doesn't have anything you don't have. I bet you could find them in 5 minutes on the internet.
It's absolutely true and completely humbling when you realize that. Humbling and motivating at the same time. That's why this thing of taking action is at the core of this. All the rest of it comes to the point where you've got to go out there and try new things and do things differently because the world is changing really, really fast. Okay, that's at the core of this podcast is this idea that, man, the world is changing fast. And we want to help people find that success lens really fast. And it's possible that it could be more aligned with your future that has excitement and your purpose and more money and all that. But taking action is so key, right? The takeaways from this and what we encourage people to do, if you've gotten to this point in the episode, is literally get out a pen and paper if you haven't already, or get out a document and start writing out what 2 or 3 unreasonable actions that you can take this week until we release our next episode, okay, that were stimulated by this conversation. What actions can you start taking that may feel a little bit like uncomfortable? So a couple of ideas, just even based on what we're talking about. This notion of learning new skills. Who can you learn from? Who can you model from? Who can you start following? Do they have a course? Do they have a community? Do they have a book? This is what you want to be doing, okay? Do you need to have conversations with people at your current work? Or are there new conversations that you can start instigating that maybe you wouldn't have before you listen to this? Don't isolate. Reinvention is an opportunity to reach out and have conversations and be honest. We didn't cover it so much on this call, but having authentic, real conversations, even if you're in that first stage of you don't really know what's next, reach out to people. It's like, hey, I'm in this place right now and I would love to meet up for a coffee, or I would love to have a conversation on Zoom just to see what you're up to. Like, that's an unreasonable action for a lot of people, but right in there holds the seeds for things that will emerge after. This is not a time to be frozen. This is not a time to remain isolated. This is a time to actually like be in the world, to start learning and talking and having conversations, and then start doing things yourself. You love that idea of unreasonable actions, right?
Yeah,
like, and
I
think
love that.
and you've done a lot of that. Like, you did that so beautifully.
What I love is we use it a little bit ironically because it's perfectly reasonable
Right.
actions in many cases, but it feels unreasonable to your stuck self, right? The person that's a little bit scared of taking action to reinvent and dragging your feet. I wanted to latch on to something you said, Todd. If you see that person who's out there who's doing the thing you want to do or something like that, that's a model for what you might want to do, be genuine, be authentic, be real. If you ask someone to just actually have a coffee and talk to you about their thing, or you want to pick their brain and connect with them, 90% of people, I think, if you approach them authentically and genuinely, would love to have that conversation. We can call this portion of the podcast, Chris Takes the Piss Out of All Your Excuses. Because I think that's one of the ways that we talk ourselves out of it, is like, well, I don't want to reach out to that person or whatever it is. If you're genuine and authentic and real, you are going to get good results from those conversations. I'm also going to give you 3 of my examples of, call them unreasonable, very reasonable actions that I took at the beginning of my reinvention. 1, I signed up to be one of the first clients for a new coach. Right? There was a coach who was putting his own shingle out and he was looking for some pro bonos and new clients. And I volunteered to go do that. It was through a friend of a friend. Life-changing. Honestly, turned me on to the idea that coaching even existed. And that's how I'm here today, ultimately. But not something I would have necessarily said yes to even a year before then. I signed up for a course around how to focus my business and some marketing communication. And I paid for a course and subscribed to that. Nothing I would do in a million years prior to that. One of the first actions I took when I was launching my coaching business was I sent an email out to 40 of my contacts who I thought it might be relevant for. Not quite a cold email, but not particularly warm, meaning in terms of those people being ready for it. And just put it out there and said, hey, I'd love to offer some free services to people if anybody wants to try this.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I got my first 10 free clients. That's where I got my first paid client ever. That turned into referrals to other paid clients. All of these things, by the way, were uncomfortable for me. Didn't feel like the sort of thing that I would do. So they're all examples of taking action, taking maybe what feels like unreasonable action. And, the list could go on, Todd. I'm sure we could probably come up with 1,000 of those such things that we did in the course of our own ongoing reinvention and business building and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me was around learning that I really needed to understand digital marketing and communications better than I thought that I did. And that was humbling for me because I thought that I was good at it, but I wasn't. And that's when I did what you did. I was like, oh, I need to learn from people. And I invested in myself, right? I invested in not only money, but time to learn these new things. I took action, which is what we're hoping you're getting out of this conversation. The most important thing is to not just sit around and bemoan everything that's going on in the world and with your life, or to focus on the challenges that you're having in reinvention. It's not necessarily the smoothest ride up. For some people, it may be, but this kind of requires you to really look in the mirror and go through a process. And one of the actions, of course, you could take is to join Chris and I. We have a whole community that is dedicated to reinventors. We would get on coaching calls and we help people and coach them. And there's others that you'll find that are also in this process, which I believe really, really helps, because it's not like we can always have this conversation with people that we're really close to yet. Like there's a process for communicating our reinvention hopes. But when you're around others that are in the same boat, it makes it easier and you find inspiration. And that's always an option for you to check us out and what we're doing there. Chris, whenever we talk, it makes me really feel how many different lenses of conversations we can have. I'm taking notes about how many different ways that we can share practices and perspectives about how to reinvent and to reinvent faster with more success. That to me is always the goal. When we win, it's when someone has taken the advice on, taken the coaching on, looked at new pathways, found things that they wouldn't have found before, that have been able to create success and income and a lifestyle that was unexpected before they had met this concept. I feel like we just moved the ball forward on that today, and I'm even more inspired than ever. Yeah.
Some would even say that their expectation was unreasonable until they went and took action, and then it turns out it might have been pretty reasonable after all.
Jamie, go take that one down and, write it up for us. And then we'll have to get a lawyer for when Joe Rogan sues us for some reason. I don't know. But Chris, man, so good being with you. We have so many more juicy episodes. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast here, and we look forward to getting to know you.